Robots. Who doesn't like robots in sci-fi? Big and stumpy, small and trundly, anything in between and beyond. Robots are everywhere in sci-fi. But what about evil robots? And I don't mean Terminators or battle droids or Daleks, no. I mean robots that you put a demon inside of. I'm sure a lot of 40k fans are aware of the concept of a Daemon Engine, a construct that may have been any number of things in the past, but now, with the use of twisted, chaotic energies and a demon from the warp, has been turned into a hulking merging of metal and flesh. But this idea did not spawn from nowhere, and I wound up finding myself growing curious. How did Daemon Engines become what they are? Should we take a look and see how that came to be? Rogue Trader was the thing where a lot of things in 40k found their roots, be it directly, like with the Space Marine Legions, Custodian Guards, Eldar Craftworlds and Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka, through a bit of fudging and shifting of the lore, like with the Dark Elf Space Troopers and Chaos-corrupted Eldar eventually turning into the Dark Eldar, or the Squats being reimagined into the Squat Charterhouses of Necromunda and Leagues of Votann in 40k proper, or in a roundabout way, like with Space Crusade's Chaos Androids being a possible origin for the design of the Necrons. Many things in Chaos got their start in Rogue Trader as well, the god-specific traitor legions and their Primarchs, the Black Legion being led by a War Master even after Horus's death, and this piece of art that was later reimagined into this piece of art. And before the Realm of Chaos books were even released, we got a hint at what Chaos can do to Machina in the Adeptus Titanicus book. On page 10 of the book, we find this image of a Chaos Titan of Khorne being accosted by a pack of Slaaneshi demonettes. The twisted expression on the Titan's faceplate, the Baroque detailing, the spikes, these all hint that this god engine has been twisted by the corruptive powers of the warp into something more demonic, a first hint at what is to come. We had, at this point, seen the Imperium utilize the devastating walker that is the Dreadnought, and, as the Imperium was the primary source of converts to Chaos, it would make sense that their war machines would make their way to the arch-enemy side as well. It is indeed here, in the Realm of Chaos Slaves to Darkness book, that we see on a miniature how the warp twists machines to its whims, in the form of a Chaos Dreadnought. A spin on the standard Imperial Dreadnought design, this design utilized a lot of the classic Chaos Space Marine aesthetics of biomechanical armor, with the Chaos Dreadnought here looking significantly more Giger-esque than what would come later. Power fists replaced for crab claws, a skeletal face, spine-like piping and ridges, and almost muscle cord-looking tubes along the frame of this hulking mass of metal. Even a scorpion-like stinger around the back of the model, though some have opted to build the model with the stinger pointing forward in a very conspicuous way. This was not, however, the only Chaos Dreadnought model that we got in Rogue Trader. In 1990, MB Games and GW released Space Crusade, where we received this marvelous model, the Dreadnought! The Space Crusade Dreadnought was completely different from any other Dread design, completely mechanical with a sort of Ed 209 look to it. It had swappable weapon arms and had options for a trio of heavy weapons, a missile launcher, a plasma cannon, or an assault cannon, the same weapons one of your Space Marines could take. There's also a prototype design on the side of the box, which is fairly similar to the model we got in the official release, though with some slight differences. An expansion, Mission Dreadnought, from 1991, brought another design to this Dreadnought, taller and armed with more weapons of mass devastation than the previous design. You can build these dreads in a variety of different ways, the classic design being called the Mark 7 Malevolent class, a taller form with the classic's weapons being the Mark 8 Marauder class, a shorter one with the new heavier loadout being the Mark 9 Dominator class, and the tallest, most heavily armed being the Mark 10 Abomination class. This expansion also gave both the Dreadnought and the Marine players new weapons to wield, las cannons, fusion guns, or multi-melters as they'd be called now, and conversion beamers. 1992 saw the last Rogue Trader release that hinted at what was to come, in the form of the Blood Slaughterer. I went into more detail in my Khorne video, but the Blood Slaughterer was a robot corrupted and possessed by a demon of Khorne. It was protected by a demonic aura and wielded a lash of Khorne and a chain axe with two chest-mounted bolters, although they kind of look like bolter earrings, which are, obviously, all the rage in the 41st millennium. With it being released in the tail end of Rogue Trader and being axed in 1996's Codex Chaos, I'm sure plenty of people who got their exalted and aspiring Deathbringers of Khorne for AOS can relate to that, but at least in AOS there was the Deathbringer for you to use. In 2nd edition 40k you were SOL if you wanted to use a Blood Slaughterer. However, this doesn't mean that you'd be lacking in chaosy lumps of metal, as the Chaos Dreadnought is making an appearance again with a brand new model. You know, the Dreadsock model. This hefty lump of metal could be armed in multiple different ways, though each had some precedent in the standard Space Marine Dreadnoughts, except the Power Scourge. This model would remain for a good long while too, and would even get a few Legion-specific models from Forge World, and some unique weapons for each Legion, like a massive Sonic Blaster for the Sonic Dreadnought, or double Chain Fists for the Berserker Dreadnought. However, these dreads didn't have as much in common with Daemon Engines as they did with, well, the classic Space Marine Dreadnoughts. Sure, much of the lore said that Chaos Dreadnoughts often go mad and are seen as more of a bloodthirsty monster. There are some that are still seen as respected elders, like the Warmonger, a Wordbearer's Dreadnought holding the body of Sor Talgron, from whom the Dark Apostle Marduk sought guidance in the book Dark Apostle. The Warmonger is actually a rather tragic figure. I fully recommend reading the Wordbearers trilogy. But returning to Epic for a spell, we've got ourselves quite a few Daemon Engines to look at, and for once, I'm not just calling them Daemon Engines. They are actually called Daemon Engines in the Flyers. Many of these engines got rules in the 1992's Renegades box, and I've talked about some in my Khorne video. I won't dwell on those much, but we got the Lord of Battles, the Brass Scorpion, the Doom Blaster, the Blood Reaper, the Cannon of Khorne, the Death Dealer, and the Tower of Skulls. That last one is actually one that I will talk about a bit, for a simple reason that I'm slightly confused by not just it, but its fellows, the Plague Tower and the Silver Tower. Are towers engines? Can you consider a Tower of a God to be a Daemon Engine? I am being silly and facetious. I do assume that these are meant to be siege towers or something of the like, though the Silver Tower does just look like a wizard's tower above all else. The Silver Tower has actually had more prevalent appearances in the Age of Sigmar-based board game Warhammer Quest: The Silver Tower, and was a fairly important plot point in the game Space Marine 2, though it certainly had a very different appearance than the Epic miniatures. Sticking to the changer of ways, we also saw two other Daemon Engines, both airborne, in the form of the Firelord and Doomwing, bird-like Daemon Engines that would sow fiery destruction from above. I would not be surprised to learn that these were the basis for the Helldrake. We'll get to that one later. Nurgle, on the other hand, sticks closer to the medieval war machine aesthetic, with a siege tower-like Plague Tower joined by a trebuchet-like Contagion. All of them had some faces on them, a classic aspect of old Warhammer miniatures that I think GW should bring back. More freaky faces on your Chaos models, please, Games Workshop. Slaanesh had very few simple Daemon Engines, the way Nurgle, Tzeentch and Khorne did, but what She Who Thirsts lacks in everything else, she makes up for with Knights. The 1995 and 96 Citadel Miniatures Annual showcased a number of Slaaneshi Knight-sized walkers, including the Hell Knight, the Questor, the Hell Scourge, the Hell Strider, and the Subjugator, all of which having some delightfully long legs and freaky designs. Armorcast also made a few designs in 40k scale using resin, namely the Cannons of Khorne and the Cauldron of Blood. I've talked more about Armorcast in both my Khorne and Eldar videos, so I'll take a leap forward to the next edition, where things start getting more familiar. While 1999's Codex Chaos Space Marines had nothing new for us, we needed to only wait 3 years to get a brand new Daemon Engine miniature. In fact, one could argue that in 40k, this was the first Daemon Engine, the Defiler, and thus began the 24-year-long Crab Rave. This thing is huge, at least by the standards of the time. Hell, even today, it's bigger than most non-super heavy Daemon Engines. The Defiler is armed with a Defiler Cannon, a massive gun at the front of its boxy torso, as well as a pair of shearing claws and 2 sponson-mounted secondary weapons. Mine specifically is armed with butcher cannons and a missile launcher. Typically the Defiler would have a head atop the boxy frame, but this one's previous owner opted to leave him without one. I do like the scowly demon face on the top hatch though. The Defiler was a fully plastic kit, and the amount of ball joints allowed for a wide array of poses. In fact, some people opted to leave the claws unglued, as this would allow you to pose them however you wanted and simplify transportation. Yes, I opted to do this. Getting his claws to stay in place is annoying, but worth it. Forge World had been making hardback Imperial armor publications since 2003, giving rules and lore for their different vehicle designs. And in 2009, the third part of the three-part Siege of Vrax campaign was released. Here, we got rules for a trio of new Daemon Engines, and the Defiler, in case you wanted slightly fancier rules for it than what you had in the Codex. Two of these malefic machines were ones we'd seen before, namely the Greater Brass Scorpion and the Blood Slaughterer. The Brass Scorpion got a sleek, gorgeous new update with a smooth silhouette and significantly less skulls on it than the previous version from Epic, but keeping the general conceit of a scorpion-shaped demon engine festooned with weapons. The Blood Slaughterer, on the other hand, got a fairly robust update, turning the angry human-like robot on wheels into this skittering tick-like machine, though still keeping an angry face on the front. The Blood Slaughterer Impaler was a fairly simple weapon swap, switching the standard Slaughterer's second Slaughter Blade for an Impaler Harpoon to drag enemies into close combat with. But these two are old hat. I spent some time talking about them in the Khorne video. There is, however, a new demon engine in this book as well, the Nurgle Corrupted Blight Drone. A beetle-like demon engine held aloft by two propellers by either side, and gazing over the battlefield with a single malignant eye lens, the Blight Drone is a gross new demon engine with clear insectoid influences. They're armed with autocannons and strange maw-like apparatus, capable of belching out toxin and acid powerful enough to eat through metal and flesh in a matter of seconds. It's even rumored that the Blight Drones feed on the corpses of fallen warriors like flies. These three demon engines represent a fairly good feel for how demon engines would be depicted with Forge World. Malignant, slightly organic appearance, but still fully formed of cables and machina. The exception is, of course, the Blight Drone, with sloughing flesh on the underside of the carapace, but a machine of Nurgle can be expected to have some grossness. The 2008 Demons Codex for 4th edition introduced a new demon engine to 40k, exclusive to Chaos Demons army lists, the Soul Grinder. Demons desperate to gain power above their station may strike an unwise bargain with the master of the Forge of Souls. Thus are they remade into the hulking war engines known as Soul Grinders, and given the might to crush and blast all in their path for a steep and ultimately never-ending price. It is said that when a demon is defeated, they are cast into the Forge of Souls, where their essence can languish for centuries before they are returned to their former greatness. And while time works differently in the warp than it does in real space, this time can still be a time of excruciating waiting, without battle, without ecstasy, without scheming, without afflictions. And these demons wish to return to that which they so desire. And sometimes, the Forge hears their pleas, and it, or its Soul Forge king, the demigod Vashtor, answers, offering a way out of the Forge for a price. The demons that agree are bound by the Oath of the Iron Pact, and are reconstituted as Soul Grinders, tasked with reaping a harvest of mortal souls for the Forge of Souls. This task may seem simple, but in truth it is insurmountable, as even while the Soul Grinder reaps its tally, the debt owed may rise erratically, always tantalizingly out of reach, keeping the Soul Grinder nigh eternally in debt. College life, am I right? The Soul Grinder is based on the Defiler kit, but the top half is drastically different, a muscular humanoid torso with a snarling demonic snout. This means that the Soul Grinder is still a massive monster, but significantly more fleshy than its Space Marine counterpart. Although at this time the Soul Grinder was purely a 40k creation, it would make its way into Warhammer Fantasy, appearing in both Total War Warhammer and the Old World. The Soul Grinder wasn't the only Demons exclusive engine either, with Khorne getting the Skull Cannon and Blood Throne to add to their armies in both Fantasy 8th edition and 40k 6th edition. But before we get to 6th edition, I need to make a pit stop in Forge World again, purely to gush. In 2014, the Imperial Armor Volume 13, War Machines of the Lost and the Damned, was released, and that gave rules for each of the Chaos vehicles Forge World had sculpted. Some were things like Predators, Vindicators and Land Raiders that Forge World made upgrade kits for, others were wholly new tanks that were, nevertheless, available for the Astartes as well, like the Fellblade, Thunderhawk and Contemptor Dreadnought. Some were chaotic vehicles that were not actual Daemon Engines, like the Dreadclaw Drop Pod and the Hell Talon Fighter Bomber, but one in here stands out among the rest. This, the Decimator. The Decimator is a Daemon Engine somewhat on par with a Dreadnought or a Domitar Automata, aesthetically speaking. It is said to be a fusion of human and Xenos technologies, fused together with the powers of the Warp. It is believed in the 41st millennium that the first encounter with Decimators was during the Grief of Herodin in M35, a series of mass genocides carried out by Chaos forces against the Imperium, with the former utilizing these dreadful machines. The Decimators could use a multitude of terrifying weapons, including the close combat-focused Decimator Siege Claw, a similar weapon to the Leviathan Siege Claw, though with this one being armed with a heavy flamer, a storm laser designed for shredding through infantry, a conversion beam cannon, a devastating weapon the longer the range, a butcher cannon for when you need to rip through heavy infantry, and the most unique of all, the Soul Burner Petard, a weapon that is rumored to be similar to energy containment technology used by the Olmiathic League, though the warp-corrupted technology has proven itself as temperamental as it is devastating. I love this thing. When I started my Chaos army, I was interested in looking through a few Forge World miniatures, merely to have a peruse of the things for offer, but when my gaze landed on this thing, I instantly fell in love. And look! It even has a creepy demon face on its thigh! Going back a little bit, 2012 saw the release of the 6th edition of Warhammer 40k, and with it, a box set of new models. This box set was the Dark Vengeance, comprised of Dark Angels and the Chaos Space Marines of the Crimson Slaughter, and alongside the crazed cultists, Exalted Chosen, and the power-hungry Chaos Lord Sevastus Cranon, we got this guy, an update to the Chaos Dreadnought, the Hellbrute. Once the resting place of an honored veteran of the Legion, the Hellbrute has been twisted by the powers of Chaos into a horrible amalgamation of machine and flesh. Though it once may have been an honored brother, it is now little more than a frenzying monster, seeking to kill, crush, and rend its enemies limb from limb. I won't get too deep into this topic. I think a video on Dreadnoughts would be pretty neat, don't you? But the Hellbrute was not the only Chaos War Machine we would get in 6th edition. In 2012's White Dwarf issue 394, we would get a trio of brand new Daemon Engines. One of these models was even on the very cover of that issue, the Mauler Fiend. More like Mauler Friend, look at this big baby! The Mauler Fiend is an adorable little siege engine, vaguely canine and reptilian at the same time, with some hooves going on. Its primary weapons are its two massive arms, which it uses to crush any who dare stand in its way. But it can be armed with an additional pair of weapons, either lasher tendrils to soften up its prey and deal with infantry easier, or magma cutters, high-power, short-range melter weapons, to add a bit of shooting to your melee. And speaking of shooting, the Mauler Fiend kit did not come with just a Mauler Fiend. It was a dual box that let you build either a Mauler Fiend or a Forge Fiend. The Forge Fiend is not as cute, but is still somewhat cute. It's planted on 4 small but powerful feet, and is armed with a pair of powerful weapons on its arms. These weapons are either Hades autocannons, whose firing sounds like the shrill shrieks of the damned, and is able to rip through even the heavier infantry, or the ectoplasma cannons, which fire the tortured, screaming souls of mortals as plasma projectiles at their enemies. A Forge Fiend can have a head similar to a Mauler Fiend, or it can have a third ectoplasma projector as its head as well, turning it into what Imperial scholars call a Cerberite. The third Daemon Engine in this issue of the White Dwarf was the Helldrake, a familiar sight to those who've played Space Marine 2, because if you joined the game anytime around late 9th or 10th, you've certainly not seen them on tabletop, much to my chagrin. The Helldrake is a twisted and mutated Astartes aircraft, a fusion of man, machine and demon, an airborne predator. Its prey is other aircraft and aerial monsters, something displayed in the book Oaths of Damnation, where one deftly took down an Overlord gunship before being lanced by a lasfusel shot. Helldrakes are armed with their deadly rending claws and maw and scythe-like wings, but also a ranged weapon in their maws, either a Hades autocannon or a Bale Flamer to terrorize ground troops with. In this issue of White Dwarf, we've seen the two modern design aesthetics for Daemon Engines, from the two different design studios. The Mauler Fiend and Forge Fiend have more fleshy, mutated bits on them, which is something that would remain a constant for Daemon Engines in 40k, while the Helldrake is slightly more akin to the specialist design studios, that's what Forge World's now called, Daemon Engines, with no flesh at all, and a body made primarily of tubes and wiring, as we've seen with the Brass Scorpion, Blood Slaughterer, and my beloved Decimator. But with this, we reach modernity. In Horus Heresy, Forge World's current big game project, the first Daemon Engine we got, sort of, was the Maragal, a word-bearer-specific variant of the Contemptor Dreadnought, within which was interred a possessed Gal Vorbak warrior. After 10th edition put them in Legends, the PDF publication Depths of Tredecima, and later the Martian Civil War supplement, added 4 of the Forge World Daemon Engines to Heresy, namely the Brass Scorpion, Blood Slaughterer, Decimator, and the Khitan, based on the Lord of Skulls chassis that I talked about more in detail in the Khorne video. Legions Imperialis, the current epic-scale game system set in the Heresy, further added a set of brand new Daemon Engines, in the form of the Stalker constructs, namely the Cerberos Overlord Heavy Stalkers, Erax Butcher Assault Stalkers, Tenebrax Archer Battle Stalkers, Scintillax Cyclops Noospheric Stalkers, and Harpax Swarmer Scout Stalker hosts, mostly adhering to the design philosophy of the previous Forge World engines. With luck, these will see the 28mm scale tables as well. In 40k, Daemon Engines have gone more in the fleshy route. The previously mentioned Lord of Skulls still retained a more mechanical and wiry look, perhaps giving some hints to how future Khornate Daemon Engines might look like. Please, GW, I am begging you! But with the updated multi-part Hellbrute kit, the Venom Crawler, first released in the Shadow Spear and Start Collecting boxes, before being bundled in with the Obliterators, the Hellstalker, upon which the Lord Discordant rides, and the engines of the Death Guard, from the fetid Blood Drones, a reimagining of the Blight Drones of old, the Mephitic Blight Haulers, and the Plague Burst Crawlers, solidifying the fleshy, mutated feel of Daemon Engines in the 41st millennium. And with a brand new reimagined Defiler now scuttling on the battlefields of the Eye of Terror, it's safe to say that Daemon Engines have fully settled into their current form. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, perchance even subscribe. As I'm writing this, I'm only 5 away from my first 100 subscribers. And if you made it all the way to the end here, tell me what your favorite Daemon Engine is, and maybe what you'd like to see reimagined from Epic. My favorite is the Decimator, as I may have already made obvious, though the Mauler Fiend is a close second. I've had this video planned and would have liked for it to be a bit more current, but I kind of postponed it and thought it would end up being too long, and then life got in the way. Speaking of, videos should be returning to a more normal release schedule now. But anywho, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!